In an interview with the Times UK, Bill Gates admitted to making a huge mistake by affiliating with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Gates told the Times, quote, "At the time, I didn't realize that by having those meetings, it would be seen as giving him credibility. You're almost saying, I forgive that type of behavior or something. So clearly the way it's seen, I made a huge mistake not understanding that." Well, since 2013, Bill Gates had multiple fundraising dinners promoting the Gates Foundation with Epstein in attendance after Epstein had been convicted of soliciting prostitution from minors. The dinners were a source of contention between Gates and his now ex-wife, Melinda Gates. Melinda appeared on CBS to discuss Gates' relationship with Epstein back in early March. Let's watch.
You know, it was also widely reported that Bill had a friendship or business or some kind of contact with Jeffrey Epstein, and that you were not, that was very upsetting to you. Did that play a role in the divorce at all in this process?
Yeah, as I said, it's not one thing, it was many things. But I did not like that he'd had meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, no.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you made that clear to him?
I made that clear to him. I also met Jeffrey Epstein exactly one time.
Did you?
Yes, because I wanted to see who this man was. And I regretted it from the second I stepped in the door. He was abhorrent. He was evil personified. I had nightmares about it afterwards. So, you know, my heart breaks for these young women because that's how I felt. And here I'm an older woman. My God, I feel terrible for those young women. It's awful.
You felt that the moment you walked in? I didn't realize that.
He was awful.
Yeah. And you shared that with Bill, and he still continued to spend time with him?
Any of the questions remaining about what Bill's relationship there was, those are for Bill to answer.
Okay.
But I made it very clear how I felt about him.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's really interesting that she would say it's almost like she demanded she met Epstein. Like there was something with Bill's relationship with Epstein, and she's like, I've got to meet this guy. Isn't that kind of odd to say, well, I wanted to see him. I wanted to meet him one time, so I did, and felt really gross and, you know, all the...
Yeah, they're going through, they went through, right, a divorce. You have to, those are all often very bitter. I feel that way about the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp trial, right, which we're here, you know, getting pieces of, and a lot of people are like, really, oh, this was an example of, you know, the male being abused, and like, no, and then they're very Amber Heard loyal people, like, you know, there was, I'm sure, a lot of bad. It's rough. It's ends of relationships are rough. So I don't want to, you know, take what she's saying and just automatically say, yeah, that's absolutely the truth. We, you know, but regardless, it was clearly not smart to meet with Epstein after he'd been convicted. I mean, one thing to just not, if he's not, you don't know, or you don't know what he's up to, but after he's been convicted, you know what he's up to.
Yeah, there's no plausible deniability here. And to her defense, she was saying, like, I'm going to not say anything specifically about the nature of their relationship. I'm going to leave that for him to answer. And I guess we're getting this out in drips and drabs in the context of the initial clip that we listened or we quoted from, where he is being asked by some people, not as pointedly as I would like, but he is being asked by some people about the nature of that relationship. But I do think, given that, you know, Melinda avoided saying a lot that she could have said about, you know, Gail used the word friendship. She kept it as, like, you know, kind of a more formal relationship in the language that she used. Even then, reading between the lines, it seems to me that they obviously had some kind of a conversation about Bill having this ongoing relationship of whatever nature with Epstein. And she, as his wife, was like, okay, well, if you're justifying this to me, if you're saying it's worthwhile, let me go ahead and meet him once and see why it is. And for that to be her reaction to meeting him as an adult woman, the implication of her saying, well, even as an adult woman, I felt that he was repugnant. Yeah. The implications of that, I think, are pretty damning.
On top of this, you remember that there was the email that Bill Gates sent out saying, the Times actually reported on this, that after their 2011 meeting, Epstein said to some people, oh yeah, Bill's great. And Bill Gates said, oh, Epstein's charming and intelligent. And then he said, quote, his lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not work for me. A very attractive Swedish woman and her daughter dropped by, and I ended up staying there quite late. That's from Bill Gates. That's an email. So, you know, for him. Oh, yeah. So for him to now say, oh, remember Epstein was convicted in 2008. This was in 2011. He met the guy. He knew all about that. There's no way to not know about it. And then he says his lifestyle is intriguing. This attractive woman and her 15-year-old daughter stopped by, and I was there quite late. You know, I don't know. Come on, Bill. You know, I mean, he's now sitting there saying, oh, I didn't know, I was legitimizing this person.
Yeah. There's you can't, right, after he's been arrested, prosecuted, convicted or a pled or whatever the arrangement. You can't. There's no deniability at that point. Don't say. Why would you? Who on earth? What kind of judgment for your professional world do you have to say the kinds of things you just described about someone who credibly accused, what went through the criminal process relating to sexual conduct with underage girls?
Let me ask you guys this. Do you think do you note there to be any inconsistency between how some of the people in Epstein's orbit are being treated and talked about and still kind of welcomed in polite society as compared to some of the other folks in the course of the Me Too movement who have, maybe gone down for less extreme things than, cavorting with a known, child molester or a predator and all of these other kinds of things. I mean, it seems kind of interesting to me that someone like Bill Gates is still in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, there's guys that have, there's people, to your point, Briahna, that have lost their jobs because they were maybe a manager over somebody who had, somebody complained about a coworker and a higher level manager maybe didn't act on it. So they weren't actually involved. They were not the ones doing any sexual harassment or putting anybody in a compromising position. They just maybe didn't quite act on it to the level that now people look back and say they should have acted on, and they even lost their jobs in the Me Too movement.
Yeah,
and they weren't even the perpetrator.
Aziz Ansari had to disappear for a couple years for the equivalent of having a bad date.
Right, he didn't have a good selection of wine. But it is, I mean, obviously nobody can fire Bill Gates, but it is interesting, and whether or not you think that, taking people's livelihoods away is the right way to respond in all of these situations is a whole discussion that ends up happening on the internet. Right. But I do think it's interesting just as a social experiment that Bill Gates doesn't seem to have the kind of social blowback in terms of where he's allowed to go and the way that people still are obviously very solicitous of his time and opinion on inflation and all these interviews that he's given on the economic context and all of this. It is interesting to me that he's out there still, he's giving interviews, and only infrequently does someone take the time to even ask him about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, resulting in the clip that motivated this segment.
Yeah. No good. Just gross. I mean, whenever we talk about this whole Epstein thing, it's still hard. I know it's true, but so hard to believe that so many rich and powerful people were just like, oh yeah, I'm going to hang out with that guy. Let's fly on a plane together. And that just went on for years. And I know it happened. I know they did that, but it's one of the most. You would think it's an insane conspiracy. It's utterly true. I guess it's an example of the fact that sometimes things that sound like insane conspiracies are true.
Yeah.
So, anyway, we will have more Rising after this. Stick with us.